Hello and welcome to Views on News. I'm Jawad Tehami. In today's program, we are going to take up for discussion two important developments: the economic situation of the country with improved economic indicators, and also Finance Minister Mohammed Aurangzeb's talk regarding as to the improvement on the economic front and that determination of the government in order to steer the country's economy in the direction towards progress, prosperity as well as development. The other relates to upcoming exercises 25 and the inaugural dialogue in the lead up to that particular exercises 2025. Let's begin with the first one. Pakistan's Finance Minister Mohammed Aurangzeb in an interview on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum has said that Pakistan's current and rapidly improving economic situation and also he has expressed the government's determination to achieve the sustainable export-led growth rate of 6% by 2028. He has also said during the current fiscal year, the tax is worth 1,300 billion rupees will be collected. Also, the government of Pakistan's finance division in its monthly outlook and update has said, let me quote, Pakistan's economy has demonstrated sustained positive developments during July to November fiscal year 2025, indicating an optimistic outlook for the ongoing fiscal year. Macroeconomic fundamentals have strengthened, marked by a further deceleration in CPI inflation, with stable food prices, effective fiscal consolidation, resulting in fiscal surplus, current account surplus, supported by increased exports and remittances, and an accommodative monetary policy stance. These developments have bolstered the business and consumer confidence, reflected in significant private sector credit uptake and a sharp rise in the Pakistan Stock Exchange. Prudent fiscal management and strategic reforms are paving the way for sustainable economic growth. Let me bring in our esteemed panel of guests who are joining us both in the studio as well as online to discuss the overall situation of the country's economy. For that, we are honored to be joined in the studio by Dr. Usman Chohan. He's an economist. Dr. Chohan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Dr. Chohan, now as to the challenges with this particular government, what were those major challenges that the government had to put in some measures in order to steer the economy in the right direction?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for having me. The biggest challenge that the government had faced in the last 2 years, which is not just us but the world as a whole, was a severe rise in the cost of living, as also expressed by inflation, but not only inflation, because inflation and cost of living are two different things. And even as our inflation is coming down now, cost of living is still quite high for people because their wages aren't catching up with that. The fact is that as global inflation came down, we saw a lot of breathing room for the economy, for households, for businesses, and for the government. And this has become a kind of cyclical thing where COVID had a huge stimulus, then you had this contraction of interest rates, and now you have things easing up. And so looking forward, I think over the next 3 years, because Aurangzeb Saab, our finance minister, has said that out to 2028 we want 6% growth. I hope it happens, and I think it is possible, but we have to realize that the 2020s have been a particularly turbulent and volatile decade, so it's actually very hard to tell what the next 5 years will be like before something else happens, God forbid. That's, I think, the big consideration.
Okay, so you already mentioned of inflation going down considerably. We have also seen it has gone down considerably in the last couple of months from what it used to be, around 30 plus points, 38%, and coming to 4.9 in November. Now, it's a considerable reduction, but you also mentioned that the expenses of the people, as their wages are not meeting up that particular pace.
That's right.
Could you elaborate a little bit on that? How is it not matching up, and what do we understand with this particular figure of inflation being reduced?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this important question. Inflation is the change in the prices over time. So it's a rate, and that rate has slowed down. So if you see a 4.9% figure, You are comparing November of last year versus the year before that, and it's still increased by 5%. So it's slowed down, but it's a rate, and unless that rate was negative, you would still see some increase in prices. That's one thing, and it's good that it's coming down. We're very happy with that. But cost of living is more about your income versus the expenses of a household. And the fact that we had 30%, as you correctly noted, rise in inflation meant that the cost of living became difficult, which means if a household has a basket of things it has to consume, the most essential in that might be the ones that have risen the most. For example, energy has risen and food prices have risen. The most recent economic report that you quoted is correct that it's stable, but it's stable at a high number. And so we'd actually like it to come down. And there are ways to work around that to bring cost of living eases. And if you've seen in the last year elections, it was a big election year for many countries in 2024, including us. Many governments fell because of this inflation and cost of living specifically issue. I'm very, very worried about things that are happening outside of our control. The world is changing in a way that having these targets may have been feasible a decade ago, but it's not feasible now because it's not our fault. The problem is that, for example, Trump and his administration plan to set tariffs at a very high level, and they've started the study as of yesterday, and within 6 months they will be able to have a legal basis for slapping tariffs left, right, and center. This makes a very protectionist world model. That's not our fault, but it will be a thing. And the second thing is with this, tools such as AI, even our freelance and IT-oriented stuff is in danger because there was a big value-added portion of having people do that component of the IT value chain. If AI decimates this, then it is countries such as Pakistan that will face it. So maybe we have to think about how the world is changing and then what we really need to add to it, because if we have the same static model as before in a dynamic environment, you might be ready to export at 6%, but there's all these barricades, or AI has taken a lot of the work, and so keep in mind how the world is changing as well.
Dr. Usman Chohan, economist, joining us in the studio. Thank you very much.